Hey, folks. Welcome to the pre-show. Bada boom. Hope you're all doing well. Whoever's out there. Nobody in the chat room yet, but there's a bunch of you piled up outside. And I know you're there. You can come on into the chat room if you'd like. If for those of you, this is your first time here, of course, this is the pre-show. Meaning we're not broadcasting live yet. We start that at 3 minutes after the top of the hour. So this is just making sure everything's on, making sure all our right buttons are pushed, our levels are correct. So far, so good. Looks like we're doing okay. And we're ready to roll. At 3 minutes after the top of the hour, that's 2 minutes from now. So we're going to continue on with our little series that we started on the life of David, King David in the Bible. I think I find this to be a very interesting little series. We did the life of David about 5 years ago on this show. And hey, Morgan Snow, just listening tonight, she says. We are, I did this 5 years ago, and I really enjoy the topic. I enjoy the character, and I enjoy the kind of thinking that this programming of this story brings to the front. The real life story of an invented hero, King David. Real guy. But the heroic part might be a little invented. We've got about 45 seconds. We go live over on the Odyssey Radio Network. So everybody, hang on to your hats. Very soon, we'll be going live. What is that one? Oh, is that the one I want? Uh-oh. Okay. 39 seconds after the top of the hour. Top of the 2 minutes, I should say. Here we go. We're going to go dark, and we'll be back. So sit tight.
The Intrepid radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. I'm your host, Scotty Roberts. This is my show, the Intrepid radio program, and we're coming to you live on Odyssey Radio. That's ODYSY radio.com. Come on over, check out the network, see all the other programs that are there, and you can also find this show in its archives. And also, we are broadcasting a hello.
The dog and cat are fighting.
Oh, all right.
Sorry.
That's my wife, radio audience. Thank you. And the dog tried to eat the cat. That happens on rare occasions around here. The dog loses her cool with the cat, who is always slinking around, trying to stretch the boundaries of what he is and is not allowed to do. So dog likes to... our dog's got that mini English bulldog in her. She's a pug, but she's mini English bulldog. So she's tall. She's a little beefier. She's a little broader. She doesn't have quite the squishy face that a pug has, but she's got all the pug colorings. And and she's just a little more bullheaded when it comes to the bulldog part. So every couple of weeks, there's an incident that lasts about 10 seconds where the dog's like, about at it, and it's after the cat. So there you go. Hey, Randall Flagg, good to see you in the chat room. And I was just saying, if you're over on the radio listening to just the audio version of the show, you can slip over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. That's me. And you can watch the video simulcast of this program. And the best part about the YouTube is probably the only really good thing about the YouTube channel is the chat channel. If you're sitting on Facebook and you're coming in and you're commenting on the Facebook video, that will not show you the YouTube video. The YouTube chat room, and you will not be able to converse with the YouTube chat room. Only I can see you, and only you can see me, and you can see only me. Let's put it that way. And so if you want the best chat experience during these shows, come on over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Scotty Roberts. While you're there, just go ahead and subscribe. Hit the little bell. You'll get notifications when the show comes on. And if you want to join, you hit the little join button beneath the show window, and you'll find a way that you can be a member of this program. And we'll leave it at that. And speaking of that, I'm going to put on my banner down below. There you go. There's all my sites and all the junk that goes on over here. Randall Flagg, good to see you. Glad you made it in. And I think I already said hi because there's Morgan Snow right above you. So everybody, welcome to the program. Glad you're here tonight. This is also playing over on my Patreon. There is no chat room there. That's just a comment section like the Facebook. So you can go over there if you just want privacy and you want to see the program over there. It's broadcasting there as well. Also over on my Twitter page, twitter.com or x.com/ I don't know if it's Scotty Roberts or Mr. all spelled out, Mr. Scotty Roberts, or if it's MR. I don't even know anymore. Let's find out, shall we? It's a X because I didn't use it for a long time. Not because of Elon Musk. He actually drew me back into it. It was all the junk before Elon took over. I got a lot of respect for Elon Musk. So there you go. It is Mr. Scotty R. That's it. So if you want to go watch on Twitter, you can watch over there as well. And I will paste that in here just so you can see what it is. If you're on Twitter or X and you would like to join my X, that is not my XEX, but my X, X.com. And there it is, Mr. Scotty R over on X. So we started the other night talking about King David. And I know I had done a series on King David before, and we did that 5 years ago. And it was I felt a great series. And to me, this is the heart of the kind of stuff I like doing with this show. I like getting into the metaphysics and the paranormal and the occult and the mysteries and the mysticism and all of that. But I also like archaeology, anthropology, history, biblical history, religious history. I like looking at this stuff because I think sometimes, as we started bringing up last Friday, when you get to characters like David and characters like Moses and all these different stories in the Bible, we forget to look at them in their context. And by context, I mean not just the basics of when they were written and why they were written, to whom they were written, but to what would the author of what we're reading have understood about the stories he's telling. Also, what would he have understood about this people to whom he is writing? Would those people have understood things the way we do now, or would they have had a completely different contextual understanding of what was being written? So the author was writing to those people in their context. It's like my 12-year-old daughter. She is very sensitive, sweet. I love her. She's a smart ass and all of that. She's 12. That comes with the territory. But at the same time, she is got a sweet, soft core. And there's things that bother her. I remember she came home one day and they were talking about the Holocaust at school. And she said, "Did that really happen? Did that happen in your lifetime, Dad?" And of course, she had no context to understand exactly how long ago that was. And I said, "Well, Hitler, World War II, that all came to an end about 15 years before I was born. 14 years, I think." And she was like, "Are you kidding me?" And she said, "Could something like that happen again?" I said, "Yeah, it could. If this is why we have all kinds of things that we have set up in the world today to try to prevent those things from happening. But you know what we see, even with the eroding of certain rules and laws and the traditions within our own country, who are supposed to be the ones set up to help safeguard against it, we could see how easily we could slip back into that kind of thing. And especially in countries that do not have the kind of national history that we have of wanting to defend people's rights, stand for people's rights, write a constitution and a bill of rights and all of those things. So that scared her. But then this whole thing with the eclipse scared her. And because she's hearing all this crap out there. Now, maybe some of it, Rainey and I were talking about this today, maybe some of that's true, that there are some elements of all that biblical prophecy that ring true. And I heard some things, saw some videos people sent me about how the end times is being confirmed by the eclipse, by the dates of the eclipses, the crisscrossing of the last time, and the big X it makes, and the this and the that and the other thing, and all this. And it all sounds very good by very good people, good thinking people. But I said to my daughter and she was getting weirded out by this. She thinks stuff she's hearing, stuff she watches on TikTok, all of that garbage she's coming out with. And she was frankly a little bit emotionally concerned. Is the world going to end? I said, "No, sweetie." I said, "Let me tell you something. It's an eclipse." I said, "If the earth is indeed millions upon millions of years old," I said, "how many times do you suppose we've had an eclipse on this planet? And we're still here." I said, "We've had several since I was a kid, and none quite like this one. But," I said, "all this is a full eclipse." And I says, "All it means is the moon crosses in between the sun and the earth, and guess what happens? Casts a shadow, but only across this swath of America." I said, "So I wouldn't worry about it too much." I said, it's an eclipse." Okay. I don't know if she bought that, but I said to her after school today, I said, "Did we survive the eclipse?" "Yeah." I said, "See, sometimes you don't have to worry about it. You can take into consideration prophecies and all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, we've got to look at it and say, what is it? Is it a sign? Is it a divine portent? It's an evil portent. It is. The sun went black for an hour, and it's like, it's a shadow. It's a shadow. So this has been going on since time began, says Leslie Hoker over in the chat room. A good example of how mainstream media uses their power to scare the hell out of people. Isn't that the truth? It's a good example of how people get scared over something that's a natural occurrence. We had a dry summer. We need to sacrifice to the rain gods. The rain gods are angry with us. This is the kind of thinking where this all kind of came from. So there you go. Hey, Sarah Yusuf. Hey, Barbie D. Randall Flagg, I already said hi to twice. Leslie Holker. Good to have you in. And everybody who's not in the chat room, you can come over and join us. I see you out there. I know you're all there. You don't have to come into the chat room. I'm not trying to prod you if that's not something you want to do, but it is open to everybody. best chat rooms over on my YouTube channel, because then you can see everybody else. YouTube.com/Scotty Roberts. So David, where I was getting with all that is that there are all kinds of stories, all kinds of traditions, all kinds of things that get told, but outside their context, we start to put spin on them. And we put a spin on something based on our traditions that we have built up around those people, around those characters. And I think in a biblical context, our modern cultural memory of who King David was, that stands a long line of increasing idealization and reconstruction. And from the spin of Samuel, who may have written the book, although his death is in the book. So did he write that? No, somebody else, probably Nathan, his not predecessor, the other way around. The guy who followed in his footsteps and became the prophet in Israel, probably he took up the writing. Maybe he wrote the book of Samuel. So from the spin of Samuel to the cleansing of David's image in Chronicles, the book of Chronicles, to this whole messianic connection in the New Testament, to the present day, the historical David has been successively and successfully diminished, replaced by the legends that we are now familiar with. And I think that's what we're seeing. That's why I say the story of David, as we see it in, at least in the book of Samuel, in the Old Testament, that is the story of, there is a real person there. King David was a real guy. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that. I think there's also been fantastic archaeological discoveries that keep bolstering the fact that there was a house of David, an administration of the house of David, that David's palace has been found in the city of David. It's right where they said it would be. It's not that hard. The city of David is rather small in Jerusalem. It's down to it's that hill, that long, I think about a mile long hill that goes kind of a plateau hill that runs a little downhill from what was the old temple complex, which is now the Mosque of Omar. It's right below that. There's the citadel, and then there's David's palace. And all of these things are there. And they've always been there. It's just the archaeological uncovering of these things. So there's things to prove the man existed. What we don't know is, what was he really like? And all we've got to go on is a book that looks an awful lot like an ancient apologetic. This is not to cast bad light on the scripture or the Bible writers. It's just saying we have to look at this and understand what we're looking at. Recognition that even the Bible presents an idealized David, and that the Bible is only written source of information we have about David's life, has led some scholars in the past few decades to claim that maybe David never existed at all, because they look at this apologetic and recognize it for what it is. And they argue that the biblical David is not idealization of a real historical figure, but is rather an invention out of whole cloth, a projection into the past by later kings who wanted to legitimize their lineage and their status, and who created this legendary founding figure against whom to compare themselves, like King Arthur and the Round Table in England, that sort of thing. We think he really existed too. Hey, Leslie, that's a great observation. Let's do that. Sometimes I get to talking and I absolutely forget to take down that stuff. So there we go. Now we got this stuff. Now we're up to snuff, up to par. All right. And I still have a little too much light in here for my liking. So even though we're already broadcasting, let's do this. I'm going to come over here and hit this light because it's just too much. Hang on. Here we go. Technical adjustments. Bada boom. Bada boom. Bada bing. There. Lights are adjusted. I prefer that. Rather than having everything all kind of lit up. It just doesn't work for me. So, and I did want to show this before we get too far, by the way, because I got a batch of these in because I got to send them out to people who've ordered them. The Sword and the Clay. You can ask Leslie. She's got several of these. It's the last book I did. Believe it or not, this has been 2 years since this came out now. And we're still waiting on the archaeological book to get done. And then I've got books to do for New Page Books. I've been talking to my publisher. They're big books. I'm talking like the Exodus Reality and Nephilim. But here, there's an illustrated book. I wrote and illustrated this book. And you can get this. You can get some from me. I just have a few copies of these on hand. Otherwise, it would take several weeks to get them from my publisher to me, to you. If you want them autographed, you can go get them on Amazon. And then you got to send them to me to autograph them, or you just buy them, however you want to do it. But if you want one from me, signed, and I'll throw one of those beautiful bookmarks in it that we've done. These are available. So there you go. There's a little ad in the middle of the preface of the show here. And as you know, this is all fully illustrated. This whole book, and it's the true story of Will Bird and his experiences with ghostly apparition of his brother. And then the finding of an old sword, an old Roman sword after the bombings of Amiens, France. So there you go. That's available. Just contact me and we can get one of those into your hands. And I believe they're $29.95 is cover price. Cost of publishing these days, guys. Full color book, about 8,000 words long. There you go. Leslie says, all 10 of mine were personalized by Scotty. And she said, I ordered 10, one for me and 9 for my grandchildren. The ones who have read it loved it. That's fantastic. Thank you, Barbara. Barbara. I was just looking at not Barbie D. I was looking at Bada Boom in your comment, and Barbara hit my mind. That's the way my brain is today. Believe it or not. Thank you, Leslie. That's what I meant to say. Let's go. Let's get back into this. After that brief little break into talking about the book. And so, what are we talking about with King David here? We have to recognize that even the Bible is an idealized account of David. And this is the thing that's led people to believing that he may not have existed at all. And this is akin to claiming that England's Henry V never existed if we had no source of information other than Shakespeare's idealized good king. And so to a certain extent, these scholars have brought the spin of the Bible, they've bought into it just as fully as those who, like Matthew Henry, called David a saint. So it's in fact the very existence of the biblical spin that argues in favor of David's existence. And there's no need to spin a story that has no basis in reality. So if the fundamental aim of spin is to say, you know, it might seem that the event happened one way, but it really happened another way, then there has to have been an actual event in the first place. And who, given the chance to create a legendary figure from the past to serve as an ancestor and a model, would invent a story such as that of David and Nabal? How we started this little series off last Friday. Nabal, the fool. David, the thug, and his men running a protection racket. The death of Nabal. David scooping up his wife right away, marrying her so he gets all of Nabal's land. So when the stories of the two books of Samuel are understood as pro-David spin, the question of David's existence is rendered moot. He must have existed for the text to look the way it does in the Bible. And the stories about David must have been written relatively soon after the events they described, because they're grounded in the assumption that their audience knew something about those events. Keep that in mind. Let me repeat that. They had to have been written closely after or even during David's life for the audience to have understood them as events that they recognized. They knew, people knew about David. And the positive spin put on it with the apologetic was to let people go, oh no, he was a good guy. It's like going, Nixon, he was really a good guy, and here's why. It's that kind of a thing. So the task then is to find that middle ground between accepting the biblical narratives at face value or rejecting them altogether. And this entails digging beneath the pro-David spin of the two books of Samuel, removing, as we did with David in the Nabal story, those elements of the narrative that we recognize as generally non-historical in order to access the fundamental events of the past, and then trying to reconstruct the more likely story of what really happened. That's what, to me, this stuff makes this fascinating. What really happened? That's the questions we're asking. So in doing this, it's important to remember that the historical David was part of a very different place and time. The ancient Near East, the political conventions of the ancient Near East, the cultural history of early Israel in the ancient Near East. They provide this crucial lens through which we have to view and evaluate David's actions as he sought to attain and retain the throne of Israel. So similarly, understanding the literary conventions of the ancient Near East are going to reveal that the literary techniques that were used in the retelling and interpretation of David's life, the spin, they weren't uncommon to his day 3,000 years ago. Especially in the stories about and by kings of that time period. David as a person and David as a literary figure participate equally in their ancient context, and they're illuminated by that context alone. So such is the aim of what I'm trying to do with this little series. And hopefully give you a little more information than we did when we covered this 5 years ago. Nexus Professor Bauer says, you'll never know what really happened. Too much time, too many authors, and plagiarism. Sure, you'll never know what really happened. But we can get a better idea of what didn't really happen, which kind of lays bare what probably did happen. And I like to look at the stories of David as stories that were rewritten during the period when the 72 rabbis went to the Library of Alexandria in the 4th century and asked permission of Ptolemy II, the Greek pharaoh of Egypt, to scour through the old writings and reconstruct their book of faith and practice, the Jewish law, the Septuagint, the Pentateuch written by Moses. And so they took these 72 rabbis who had learned all this stuff with oral tradition for centuries, and then they go to the Library of Alexandria and look up what still exists there of their books. This is all after the captivity in Babylon, and they reconstruct it. And what did they come up with? They came up with the Septuagint, the name given to the Greek version of the Hebrew Old Testament. Yeah, Leslie, this is the same David that killed the giant Goliath. This is the David we're talking about. And there's a lot to learn about that story. It more than likely happened. But as we're going to get into, probably not tonight, that particular story, there are other things in the Old Testament books that throw up a few contradictions about what David's role was in that. But there was a story that was built up around it. And that's the tradition we have. So once again, as is the subtitle of this this little series on King David, the real life story of an invented hero. We can have those things. As a matter of fact, the people that we know and we don't even question that they existed in ancient times. You can look at some of the earliest Kenneth MacAlpin of Scotland, way back in the early, I think 400 or 500s he existed. We don't know a whole hell of a lot about him, but we know he existed. And there's stories about him. This is the same kind of a thing. Sarah Youssef says, David is illustrative of all other biblical figures. You can do the will of God and still eventually fall. Yeah, that's one of the main themes about David in the apologetic writings of Samuel. Did you notice too, Sarah, and anybody else who has attended church or synagogue, or you appreciate the Bible stories and the characters, there's not a single one of them that is presented that did not have faults. I think there's one that they never revealed a single fault about this man. I think it was Daniel. There's nothing faulted about him, and this is Daniel's great fall or Daniel's great sin. But everybody else, and they weren't presenting him as angelic either. They just told his story. And how much of that is true? Daniel in the lion's den. Is that a true story? What would have caused that if it was a true story? How embellished was it? And Daniel just seems to be a humble guy. He wasn't a ruler. He was just a dream interpreter. He was a prophet. So all of these things are very true. That makes us human. We all have faults, exactly. Somebody told me once when I was a kid about the Bible characters, like Sarah is talking about, is that God, in preserving Scripture or inspiring it, was showing us that there's not a single human that was miraculously used or raised to great heights that was not also pure, fully human and faulted just like we are. I think some of the best leaders we have are the leaders that can say, I'm a faulted guy. I'm not disqualified from leading you, but I've got my faults. And they admit to them and they move on. And I think this is the same with the story of David. Thank you for bringing that up. Sarah, I appreciate that. And so the process of uncovering this long lost man follows, the historical David, by contrast, is this ambitious and clever, persuasive and threatening, not always in power, but always in control. He's not someone we might want to emulate, but he is someone that we might recognize. This is the real guy, I think. And the whole bringing the historical David to life, we have to reach back through all this accumulated legend, separate it out kind of. It's beyond the pro-David agenda of the biblical text and into the ancient world in which David would have lived and roamed. And this process is revealing the whole flesh and blood man is far more interesting than the mythical king. The legendary David is more a marble statue by Michelangelo than a living personality, more a symbol than a man. Like I said, the real person of David that shows through even the apologetic is ambitious, clever, persuasive, threatening, murderous, always in power, are not always in power, but always in control. He's not someone we might want to emulate. He's probably not somebody we would even like very well. Sarah's right. David was Saul's exorcist in some ways. And I got some stuff to say about that too. What does an apologetic do, especially in the day and age that David lived? They have to elevate the good qualities of the king while devaluing and even demonizing the people that are supposed to be the antagonists to his protagonist. Was Saul as bad as he comes across? Or were those things that were used to elevate David and make David look better? That's the big question. I got to see which is my right can here. This one, the cold one. So I make it with the cup look more refined, like I'm drinking tea while I'm doing the radio show. No, it's sugar-free Mountain Dew. So the process of uncovering this long-lost man also means revealing something about the biblical authors, why they wrote what they wanted, and how they accomplished their goal of transforming David into the legendary figure we know today. The big question has to be asked, of course, and this is underlying it all. Are these guys writing on their own, or were they truly inspired by God? Is the Bible a divinely inspired book? That takes faith to believe. So we've got to move the faith element aside to examine the raw facts. And the writers did their job remarkably well. The biblical depiction of David has held sway for thousands of years, but it has also led people to believe that he didn't exist at all. You're right, Leslie. Despite what many of them think, man is not perfect. So these human authors are part of the story of David almost as much as David himself. They're equally part of David's world, and neither the king nor his I can never say this word right. Hagiographers, it's the too many hard consonant sounds in there, can be understood in isolation from each other. And so we're culturally invested in a particular view of David as a central figure in the founding of both a nation and a religion. David, the man, is not easily disassociated from David the legend. And his legend has been of lasting importance to Jews and to Christians alike for 3,000 years. And those who consider themselves part of the nation of Israel, either literally or metaphorically, look to David as their founding figure. Moses founded Judaism. David founded Israel, so to speak. Even though Saul was the king before him, he really was the beginning of the Israeli Empire. And he unified everybody, David did. They looked to David as their founding figure. Judaism, Christianity recognize him as the origin of much practice and belief. The religious cult that David inaugurated in Jerusalem would become the temple, where Israel would worship almost uninterrupted for 1,000 years. The sacrificial offerings, of which would serve into the present as the basis for Jewish prayer and ritual, yes, they all had their origins in the book of Moses and the law, but it was David who put it all into place. The Psalms that David is said to have written have entered every Jewish and Christian liturgy and are held up throughout Judeo-Christian faith as models of prayer and piety. The Messiah, the one who's already come in Christianity and who is yet to come in Judaism, is believed to be a descendant of David's, the original man after God's own heart. So past, present, future, all are tied back to David. And every culture values its founding myths, the stories of how it came to be. George Washington chopped down that cherry tree, didn't he? That's an origin myth story. But George Washington was a real guy. Did he chop down a cherry tree? Probably not. Or there was something like that happened. He did something, and his father recognized him as a kid that has got some integrity. He may lie, but he makes up for it, or whatever. Whatever that story is, whatever the myth, founded the myth, or was it pure imagination? They didn't invent George Washington, but they may have invented the heroic elements around him. So past, present, and future, they're all tied back to David with this thing in there. George Washington is venerated in the United States because he embodied the sort of steely resolve and steady leadership that this country aspires to demonstrate to the world. The legend of Washington and the cherry tree speaks of the value of honesty. We set aside aspects of Washington's life, such as the fact that he was an extraordinarily wealthy slave owner, that do not comport with our vision of who we want him to be in our national mythology. But we've grown to accept that, and we've understood why he owned slaves. We've even justified why he did. We've even tried, I think, to some success, to establish that his slave ownership was very different and that he realized he needed to end it. So we set aside those aspects of Washington. For Judeo-Christian tradition, David serves really the same purpose. God singled David out despite his humble beginnings, just as he singled out Israel. David actively demonstrated his faith in God, both in action and in words, just as Jews and Christians seek to do. Because David is seen as the model, it's natural that his failings should be excised from his legend. He's the model. But like I said earlier, a good leader will show his flaws and speak to them and show how to rise above them. They undermine the purpose of having the legend in the first place, so they excise them. At the same time that founding figures are understood as models, they're also mirrors for the values of later generations. This can be said already in the biblical text about David. The 2 books of Kings, written at the close of the monarchical period, mid-6th century BCE, elevate David to the perfect king. The 2 books of Chronicles, written when the temple dominated Israelite society around 400 BC, valued David as a religious leader. And so it's in every generation. The rabbis of the Talmud discussed David's prayer practices because that was central to their worldview. John Calvin in the Middle Ages. John Calvin in the 16th century, well, more the Renaissance, I guess. He focused on David as a model of piety. When Israel became a state in 1948, mere 85 years ago, it adopted its flag on its flag, the symbol known as the Star of David, an ancient Jewish emblem traditionally believed to have been emblazoned on David's shield when he went to war. And so the symbolism of recalling David's military glory in the moment of Israel's independence is hard to miss. So what we say and we think about David, both as a model and as a mirror, is directly and deeply connected with what we say and think about ourselves as modern Jews and modern Christians. What would it mean if we discovered that the historical David was in fact quite different from what we imagine or desire? For almost 3 millennia, we've had only increasingly good things to say about David. We've basked in the reflected glory of Israel's greatest king, his deeds, his words, his faith. And to challenge David's legend is thus to throw open to debate what it means to be a descendant of David, be it nationally, ethnically, religiously, messianically. So it's because the idealized David is important to us now that the historical David has any significance at all. And to rediscover the historical David is to realize that behind the accumulated legend, there was a living, breathing man in a distant place and in a distant time, whose deeds and the telling of those deeds were responsible for much of who we are today in our religions. And it's this link across the millennia that makes the search for the historical David both risky and necessary. Why is it risky? Because it could undo what we think we know about him traditionally. I don't think it would undo it for anybody who still respects what he brought to the table. And it's surely easier to rest content with the pleasant image of David preserved in tradition. But in doing this, we allow tradition to eclipse, the word of the day, eclipse. Everybody take a drink. So it's a lot easier to rest content in the pleasure and the pleasant image of David preserved in tradition. But in doing this, we allow tradition to eclipse the past in which it is rooted. Some parts of the past, the Exodus from Egypt, for example, might never be recovered fully. And the tradition is all we have. All we can do is look at, like I've done, is look around the story and find things that make it make sense. Archaeologically, historically. But it's never going to be fully recovered. So when the history is there to be rediscovered, we ignore it at our peril. We're defined by the distance between what happened over here and how we tell the story way over here. It's therefore necessary to know what happened, what didn't happen, and how to tell the two of those things apart. I'm going to talk about the mythical origins of David, which really bring us almost directly into David the psalmist and David the giant slayer. And we'll get into that, but I want to make one thing known here. There's a part of David that is written, and we'll talk about this later, the man after God's own heart, popped in my mind when we were talking about this just a little earlier tonight, and I thought I'll save it till I get into the kind of the break between the two sections here, is that there is a Psalm of David's that Psalm 52, where he's praying for forgiveness after the whole episode with Bathsheba, the child that was supposed to have been made between them, the murder of her husband Uriah by sending him into the thickest battle, when he's painted as a gloriously loyal captain in David's army. David has him killed so this sin of his wouldn't be known, but here it is laid open in this book. And the prophet comes to David one day, Nathan, and he says, I need a matter of judgment from you, O king. David sits on the throne and says, tell me what this is. The prophet says, there's a man in your kingdom who was poor, and he had one wee lamb that he raised from the time he was a baby. He loved this thing. It slept in his bed. It ate at their table, and all the different things you can look to people who have their fur babies nowadays, a term that didn't exist when that was written, or I'm sure it would have been used. And he loved this. But he was a serf, if you will, or he worked land owned by a rich man, and the rich man had a guest coming, and he needed a fatted lamb. And rather than take of his thousands of sheep, he takes this one man's ewe lamb that the man loved, and that's overemphasized in the story. And he butchers it and serves that to his guests. And the prophet asked David, he says, "What's your judgment on this matter?" And David gets hot with rage about this, which is probably very common of who David was. It's probably a realistic thing about the man. And he said, "As sure as I live," he says, "this man should be put to death." I mean, that's his reaction to this. Kill that MFer. It's probably David's words in his own way. And what does Nathan say in the story? Points a finger at David and says, "You are the man." Or "Thou art the man," it said in the Old English. Sarah says historical idealism is chosen to be passed down. Exactly. So, you are the man. And immediately Nathan goes into the account. It says, and David is set back, the king. And he says, "You lusted after this woman. You took her into your bed, knowing she was another man's wife." And he says, "And then you killed him, and this thing is known." And it says, "And for this, the kingdom will be ripped from your hands." Just like it was ripped from Saul's hands. Except David did one thing, according to the account, that Saul did not do. He asked God to forgive him. And he said to the prophet, he says, he asked for forgiveness. "Pray to God for my forgiveness." He falls to his knees and he cries. And if it's any bit of that story is true, it was probably a relief that it's known this way. Well, everybody knew it, according to the story. And then David writes Psalm 52. And in that psalm, it says, David says to God, he's praying, and he says, "Against you and you only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight." And then he says, "Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow." Such beautiful, poetic words. Forgive. I hate to think that it was not David that penned those, but whoever did, David, or if it was somebody else, I have a pretty good feeling that this was something he wrote. They're masterful, poetic words of prayer. And there was a song we used to sing in church, just a little ditty type of a song. It was white as snow. Though my sins be as scarlet, Lord, I know that I'm clean and forgiven. By the power of your love, by the wonder of your, and I don't remember all the rhyming words. By grace, I know that I can be white as snow. It's a white as snow, white as snow. And it was a very contemplative little song. And this is what David said. And I was always drawn to that passage by David, the sweet psalmist of Israel, the man after God's own heart. Did he pen that? We're going to talk about that a little later. How much of the Psalms did David actually pen? How much were attributed to David? How much were written in the honor of David? I like to think that David wrote Psalm 52. And even though that is part of our tradition, I don't think it's necessarily faulty. There are reasons to believe this. In the New International Version, it says this, and I'll close this out for the radio audience tonight. Psalm 52, and there's a paragraph, a descriptive paragraph that comes with the psalm from the ancient writings. For the director of music, a maskil of David, when Doeg the Edomite had gone to Saul and told him, David is gone to the house of Ahimelech. A lot of history in there. David writes, why do you boast of evil, you mighty hero? Why do you boast all day long, you who are a disgrace in the eyes of God? You who practice deceit, your tongue plots destruction. It's like a sharpened razor. You love evil rather than good, falsehood rather than speaking the truth. You love every harmful word, you deceitful tongue. Surely God will bring you down to everlasting ruin. He will snatch you and pluck you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous will see and fear. They will laugh at you. Here now is the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth and grew strong by destroying others. But I am an olive tree, flourishing in the house of God. I trust in God's unfailing love forever and ever. For what you have done, I will always praise you at the presence of your faithful people, and I will hope in your name, for your name is good. And that was not the right psalm, because that's the entire psalm. I think I got that wrong, which arrogant, surely God is in, and you have delivered me from my troubles. Psalm 54. Listen to my prayer, O God. Do not ignore my plea. As for me, I call to God. Cast your cares on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never let you be shaken. So we'll find it and we'll read it next time, maybe even in the captain's cabin. Listen, folks, if you're listening now, we've got to go out from the radio audience. And radio audience, see you over in the chat room on the YouTube channel. For now, live long and prosper.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid Radio Broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep,
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. Hey everyone, welcome to the Captain's Cabin. Welcome back. I did find that passage in the Psalms. You know which Psalm it was? It wasn't 52, 53, or 54. It was 51. It was the Psalm right before that. And I'm just going to open the Captain's Cabin by reading this very moving Psalm attributed to David. And it says this, create in me a clean heart, O God, for the choir master, a psalm of David, when Nathan the prophet came to him after his adultery with Bathsheba. That's the header that's in the psalm itself. So this is what it says. It says, have mercy upon me, O God, according to your loving devotion. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash me clean of my iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you and you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you may be proved right when you speak, and blameless when you judge. Surely I was brought forth in iniquity. I was sinful when my mother conceived me. Surely you desire truth in the inmost being. You teach me wisdom in the inmost place. Purify me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence. Take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain me with a willing spirit. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will be returned to you. Deliver me from blood guilt, O God, the God of my salvation, and my tongue will sing of your righteousness. O Lord, open my lips, and my mouth will declare your praise. For you do not delight in sacrifice, otherwise I would bring it. You take no pleasure in burnt offerings. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. O God, you will not despise. In your good pleasure, cause Zion to prosper. Build up the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will delight in righteous sacrifices, in whole burnt offerings. Then bulls will be offered on your altar. That's the Psalm of David. I have to think just on superficial blush at the end that this was added, at least added to, in later days, the times after the captivity, long after the monarchy of Israel. They were rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem in the 400s. It's when they sent the rabbis to the Library of Alexandria, rebuilding the scripture, because it says, in your good pleasure cause Zion to prosper, build up the walls of Jerusalem. Then will your delight be in the righteous sacrifices. I think the Psalm of David was probably contained within this song that was written for the choir master. It was a Psalm of David that I think was housed in a song that was to be sung in temple. The create in me a clean heart, O God. I think that was the original psalm. So there you go. That's my thoughts on it without any academic deeper study of it. Yes, Leslie, more have died by religion than anything else. My grandfather used to tell me that, my Jewish grandfather. And he's right. There's not many causes of war other than a pretty face, a pretty God, and a pretty sour disposition against those whose property you want to own. There's your three major reasons for war. He might have gotten farther if he said please, says Sarah. So thank you, Barbie D. I think you're gone already. She says, good night, everybody. I don't know if you leave right at the end of the radio show, if we lose you for the night. Getting a little late on your end of things, but it was good to have you here if you're still out there. Thanks for being here. Looking back at some of your comments in here. Leslie says, oh, thank you, Leslie. She said, I hope everyone checks out Scotty's page on academia.edu. Well, thank you. You can go to, just simply, you don't have to have independent there, I don't think. Just go to academia.edu/Scotty Roberts. You can see some of my articles and stuff that are up in there. Leslie said, go, good night. She says, I need to try to sleep. Blessings to all. Good night, Leslie. Claudette, welcome. I didn't see you earlier. Field guy is here. Welcome. Welcome as well. To your country, welcome. So, what else we got in here? Who else is here? King Field Guy is here. All hail, says Field Guy. You're your own Royal Herald, too. That's pretty cool. Yes, I can't trust anybody else to do it correctly. I have to do it myself. Leslie said, this is why I wish people centered their lives around faith rather than religion. Religion is responsible for more suffering than anything else. That's very true. So, a lot of it is psychological justification, said Sarah. Are you talking about the Psalms of David? Or the writings of Samuel? Psychological justification. Let's see, when was that? What point in the night? 9:38. So, when was that? 20 minutes ago. Half an hour ago. Jeez. So, and some of this we saw as it was being made. Makes us human, the story of David. So what do you think of the story of David? Do you think, I have no doubt believing he was a real person. I don't think that is what I question at all. And even this Hebrew scholar, Joel Baden, who wrote this book on King David, the head of Hebrew studies at Yale University. And he said, no question that David was real. I think he wasn't even a real guy. Pshaw. What are you thinking? So, of course, he was a real person. It's what we believe about the traditional stories and legends that built up around him. The mythology of David. So Wednesday, we're actually going to get into this a little bit more. We're going to talk about the stories of his youth, which involve the anointing by Samuel, the prophet, and then the story of the whole confrontation leading up to Goliath, the giant. It's interesting. They have uncovered in Israel the city of Gath, or Gut, as it's called. I guess it's spelled in the English Bible, Gath, of the city of Gat. Hey, Isaac Braden. Howdy, Sterling and I just came from my channel. Good to have you here, Isaac. Glad you came in. Isaac Braden, Elohim, risen Christ. There you go. So thanks for coming on in. Hey, Sterling. Good to see you. Yes, the panel is open tonight. Let me give you the link if you guys want to call in. Boom, boom. There, it's in the chat room now. You can just open that link and you'll come right into my channel, and I'll see you in miniature, and we can probably bring you in. So I'm just curious what you all think of this in general. Here's Isaac, Spirit Man. How you doing, Isaac?
Good.
Good to see you, brother.
Doing great, actually. Yeah, just hopping around. I was opening my panel. Sterling popped in.
And there's Sterling.
If we want to jump around. So nice to meet you.
Good to meet you too, brother. So
Hey,
we were talking tonight about the historical David. And, there's been a lot of controversy over the last several decades, just like there's with the whole, was Jesus a real guy, the Jesus movement and all of that, the historical Jesus. But then David, they've questioned him for maybe a couple of centuries. Was this guy real? Or is he part of the mythology of the ancient Jews? And I read a book several years ago by a guy named Joel Baden. The title was King David, the real life of an invented hero. And that's the way I see David. And this is something I enjoy, even though all my education was in Bible school. I went for my Master of Divinity in seminary, and I learned all the stuff. I was in ministry for years, and then I pushed back a little bit, and I dropped out of that for certain reasons. And yet I look at the stories. I still hold them to be valuable. And then I read a book like Baden's, and he's not trying to destroy the image of David or the story of David. He says he was a real guy. But how do we separate out the real history of someone from whom we really don't know a lot of the actual archaeological, anthropological history of David? We know the time period he lived. But then we look at these two books, 1st and 2nd Samuel in the Bible, that tell his story, and it's all constructed like an apologetic of the day and age in which David was supposed to have lived. The kings of the ancient Middle East and that whole region, they would build apologetics about themselves, which would make them and their deeds look better, more glorious, more righteous, depending on what they want to do with the people, versus and their enemies look much more demonic or demonized and evil and so on, to make them look better. And Baden's premise was that there's so many earmarks in the story of David in the Old Testament that I think this is true about David too. And he goes through and he meticulously goes through the story. And I think, one thing we've seen, that I've seen, and I did this series on David about 5 years ago on this show. And I said, I would like to scoop that up because I've got a lot more information I want to add. And that's what we've been doing. And so we were only on episode 2 of this tonight. And this whole thing of David, the real life story of a real man who was also an invented hero. And so there you go. That's what we're talking about.
Well, I just want to jump in and say,
yeah,
and I could be wrong. I met Isaac on another random panel.
Yeah,
and we were over there, and he likes to jump around, and we were going through the list of my subscriptions that were live at the moment.
Yeah,
and he went through his, and we had some in common. And he looked at yours, and he liked the topic. And
cool.
I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I have a feeling I was like, I think you're gonna like this channel because we've discussed some similar things
Yeah, yeah.
on Isaac's channel, and yeah. Anyway, yeah, he's a heck of a nice guy, and I told him you were too.
Cool.
And
Thanks, brother.
anyway, yeah,
I appreciate that.
yeah.
And yeah, this channel, I talk about, I've been doing radio for too long. I was thinking tonight when I was coming into radio, I thought, what do I do to spruce up my broadcast? You know, am I just the same old, you know, does it get any better? This is as good as it gets, folks, you know, and
Did you come up with any ideas or?
not since the beginning of the show.
Oh, well,
I was walking into the chair to sit
I
down and do tonight's show. That went through my mind. I thought, oh, what can I do? Well, we'll think about it after the show. So I don't know, you know, like Rainey and I, we're going to go do some ghost investigations locally at a old nightclub here. And we've been invited. I've known the guy for 35 years. He's an old client, old friend. And he invited us to come in. He and his brothers own one of the only two dirt official NASCAR tracks in the country, right here, about 6 miles from my house. And then he bought up one of the big river inner tubing places down the Apple River here in our town, which is about 2 minutes from here. And it's got the old nightclub there that's been there for decades that he's converted over now. And so we're going to go in there and maybe do some of that and try to broadcast some of that.
Are there like stories about the place being like haunted or what's
he said there were. We didn't get a chance to talk about it too deeply, but we were both attending a meeting, a city council type of a meeting, and we're in the back, we're chatting for a minute. And I said, hey, your place haunted over there? He goes, and he raises his eyebrows and he goes, dude. I said, we have to talk. Rainey and I should come over. And so we're going to do some of that and try to put that together so it's fun and exciting for people to watch. You know, there's two friends of mine, both people I've worked with. You remember the original Ghost Hunters, Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson. And then they split up and they both did their own shows. I worked for them on their magazine, Taps Paramag. I was the editor-in-chief. And then Jimmy Johnson was the publisher of the magazine. Now, I do radio with Jimmy every now and then. I've done radio with Jason and Jimmy every now and then. But, boy, that sounds like and I do radio with Jason and Jimmy. That's not how I meant that to sound. But they started a new thing on YouTube, ghost hunting, and Jason and Jimmy. And I watched an episode of that tonight, and no offense to my friends, but I was not. It was high quality, but it was slow and like what ghost hunting is, a little bit boring. And until you get those, ghost hunting is hours and hours and hours of boredom, highlighted by somebody going, "Get out," you know, and you're like, "Oh, it's a ghost." So you know, and so it's fun seeing them. I will say that. I hope this thing that they're doing gets progressively better. And
they live stream
two of them walking through empty buildings. So
they live stream it or they edit it?
It wasn't live stream. It's been edited.
And it was still kind of
because it's got the flyovers and Jason does the voiceovers explaining where they are and things like that. And I think it's just called Ghost Hunters.
Okay.
On YouTube, you can find it, the new one with Jason and Jim.
Okay.
And no offense to them. I'm going to get pissed at me. I'd like to have them on and talk about it, about what they're doing.
Well, it's relatively new. So if it's new, they're probably still ironing it out, you know?
Yeah. It's things like you hear a noise in an old building that's falling apart. What was that?
What was that? What was that? That's what I was going to say. When I watch those shows, that's all I went, what was that? Did you hear that? What was that?
But they do what I do. I went out, Jimmy and I have been ghost hunting and in recent, just this last year. And, you know, you hear things and you go, hey, You want to talk to us? Is that somebody? Is that something that's out of the ordinary? If it is, are you doing that? Will you speak with us? It's like Uncle Dave talking to me on this thing. Was it this thing or was it the thing on my phone? This is the spirit box. It's just sitting here on my desk. Not on. I don't really do it. Rainey doesn't want me doing these in the house as much as she's into this. She attracts enough of it all on her own. But I got the voice of Uncle Dave. You remember Uncle Dave, my friend who passed away last summer, and he was on this show every night.
He had the big beard.
The big
right?
beard, yep.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he died in late July, and but
Nice guy.
we
Nice
were
guy.
out at the Renaissance Festival grounds here in Minnesota at Halloween time. We always do. Rainey and I do a ghost hunt there for the big Phantoms Feast that they hold. And we take people to the different stages around this old site. The site is 23 acres. It's an old oak grove, the whole thing. And it's been there for 50 years, this site. It looks hundreds of years old with the buildings meant to look that way. Big stage is what it is. 20,000 people a day come through that place when it's open in the summer. And so we just go around to the stages and we do stuff and we get some pretty incredible stuff. And so we were up on what's called the knoll. It sits up above and you can see down to the main gate and things like that. And so we're up there at about 11 o'clock at night, just my son, Sam, and my wife, Rainey. And we were asking for Dave and we got Dave. It was, I always tell people, go, oh, well, you think it sounded like Dave, or, oh, you just needed to see Dave, so you heard that. And I'm like, no, I'm not that. My mind is not that gullible. And the voice I heard was definitely Dave's. And here it's 17 seconds long. So I'm going to play it. And I played this 100 times on here. We play it in between.
I haven't heard it. Yeah, I want to hear it.
Oh, you haven't heard it? Let me play it.
No.
And those of you who have heard this, bear with it. Turn up your sound because you'll hear him. I tell him I love you, Dave, and you'll hear a voice, but there's another sound that comes over his voice. So it's hard to hear. I'll play it through it a couple of times. And he actually says it twice.
Yeah, don't tell. Yeah, I want to hear it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, here we go. Turn up your sound because it comes right after I tell him I love you, Dave. So here we go. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep,
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. No, I don't know if you caught that. He said it twice. I'm going to play it again.
one more time. Yeah, thank you.
Here we go. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too, I heard.
Yep,
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. So I'll do it one more time, just so you can hear it again.
Yeah, one more time.
He says it right after I say, I love you, brother. And then I look at Rainey, I go, did you hear that? And somewhere right in there, he says it again. Here we go. And it's his voice. Dave, I love you, brother.
I miss you too.
I miss you too,
I
I
did hear
heard.
it.
Yep,
I did.
Did you guys hear that?
I heard that.
I miss you, Dave. So there you go. I like playing that because it's
I did hear it that third time. I did hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he said it twice, and
Wow,
it was
clear.
very distinct, and it was his voice. My son had experiences after his death, dreams, visitations through a spirit box, and I remember Sam was sitting, and he was just he had one on the phone. There's one called Necrophonic. And it looks a little commercial, but there's not much to it. And I downloaded it, and we use this when we do ghost hunting, along with other equipment. And Sam said he had that plan, and he was asking for Dave, and he's got a little setup. Dave had a bar built into this RV he bought, and he built a bar into it that he used a barrel, which he cut in half, put the barrel up against the wall and an additional shelf on it, and then the barrel opened up, and Dave was very crafty that way. And so when we went and cleaned all his costumes and a couple of his swords, I've got a couple of his swords still hanging on my wall. I've got costumes of Dave's from the festival hanging on my wall over there. And Sam had taken that half barrel, put it against the wall, put a candle on it, and a couple little objects of Dave's that he had. My kids grew up, I've known Dave for 32 years. So my twin daughters are 32. They've all known Uncle Dave since they were kids. And so Sam put that all up, and so he's playing, and he's on the spirit box, and he's asking if Dave's around, and he gets a voice that says, and he says, "Dad, I swear it was Sam's voice or Dave's voice." It said, "I'm right here." And Sam said, "I recognize the voice." And he said, "Hello." And he says, "I started to cry." And then the voice off the box says, "It's okay, bud. Don't cry."
Wow.
Or "Don't cry, bud. I'm okay." Something like that. And that was it for the night. That's all we got. And so when I get chills up my back and the backs of my arms when I think of that. And I like to think of myself, as my own audience has heard many, many times, I'm a fairly pragmatic kind of guy. And for me to believe in it, I got to see it, touch it, taste it, feel it, communicate with it, have me slap me on the ass or run its fingers through my hair, which has happened. And then I'll believe it. And so I'm not like, listening to EVPs and you hear, "Robert, that was old great grandma. She said, I love you."
Yeah, that's what I was expecting.
And it's like, no. And this one of Dave was so crystal clear. I'm glad we got it on film. Well, video. So that's what those are some of the other things I want to do. That's what that all stemmed off of. Everybody who's listening, that's the stuff I want to do with this show. We want to do a little more ghost hunting. We want to do a little travel. I haven't been. Oh, who said Janice Lund? I always get your name mixed up. Annunziata. Annunziata. She said, "Heard him." And thanks, Janice. I'm glad you heard him. Yeah, it was there. Let's see. What does Professor Bauer says? How about the Elohim cult that's controlled humanity for millennia? What cult is that, Professor Bauer?
I gotta go. See you later. I'm just kidding.
You're the leader? Yeah. You
I don't know about you.
You got a great beard. You look like one of those hats you put on in the winter that's got the beard on them.
It is a great beard.
So my son Sam has a big red beard. So which Elohim cult that's controlled humanity? You're using Elohim in the sense of the old name of God from the Old Testament, the big God cult. You're saying Elohim, one of the names used for, and you probably know this, Isaac, because you use it in one of your titles, I think. Elohim, defined as El is the name of God, Him is the Hebrew suffix to denote plurality. Elohim was a name used for God in the Old Testament, one of the many names for God, used the most, almost 2,700 times. And the word by definition means God among or of many gods. God of the plurality of gods. And it makes sense then when you hear the commandments, "Thou shalt have none of the other gods before me," or "have no other gods before me." So thanks, Claudette, by the way. It is amazing to hear that voice. And I like listen to that over and over again. And sometimes I'll just sit down here, I'll turn that on over and over. You don't know all the stuff I have down in this studio, which goes about 18 more feet that way. All the stuff around here that is part of Dave and Dave's and my friendship. I've got old costumes of his, like I said, hanging over there. Big black pirate watch coat with the red lapels and all the brass buttons. Dave was, amongst many things, he was a tailor, and he tailored these glorious, magnificent costumes for the Renaissance Festival for years. And he made stuff for me, and he did that coat. And I said to his brother after Dave died, he said, we got to go through Dave's stuff. Can you come and help us? And I said, sure. And he says, there's some things you want. And I said, there's one thing I really wanted Dave's. I said, it's that black coat. And then he said, well, I think your son Sam should get, and it was Dana, our friend. She helped us with this. They were all like, Sam should get all of his Captain Morgan stuff. He played the big Captain Morgan out at the festivals. And so he made his costume like the Captain Morgan from the Captain Morgan spiced rum, and he played a pirate, and Dave was a great pirate, and he was a big man. And so Sam got all those costumes, and we got a whole bunch of swords. My kids, I've got 3 kids upstairs and 3 that are grown and out of the house. Everybody got a sword. I got his old sextant that I gave to my daughters, and all kinds of stuff around here. Not just, let's see, of Dave's swords. I'm probably blocking the view now. To go over to this side. Let's see. Mine is the Scottish one at a diagonal. I've only got 2 of Dave's swords. These 2 middle ones right here. There's like a Viking sword, and then a court sword, a small sword. And that's these things, by the way, a lot smaller and a lot lighter than your normal sword. They call them court swords or small swords. And they were used basically for just, small fighting, for small dueling. It's not like this big thing. It's like a huge meat cleaver, the Scottish backsword. And then you got my sword that I wore on my costumes was this big rapier right there. And that's a lot heavier and bigger and longer than this one. You can see this is only about this long. And and it's very light. And it was great for sword. Now, Dave, by the way, was a certified sword master. And he taught, and we all engaged in sword fighting at the festival. But you had to be certified to teach it. And if we were going to do a fight at the festival, we had to rehearse it. The rule was you had to rehearse it 150 times before you actually did it on stage, because you don't want to kill each other or anybody else. But so these are all real swords. They're all made by Arms and Armor, now armor.com, and exacting replicas of the day. This one, I've talked about it before, and I just love talking about it. My Scottish sword, that basket is an original to the 1740s. It's got the king's markings on it for the army and stock numbers, and then the blade is replica and the pommel is replica. It's just the basket's original. But so anyway, this is one of Dave's. The Viking sword there is one of Dave's. I've got his costumes hanging in the room. I've got stuff he's made for me over the years for theater and stuff, all hanging around the room. So Dave's a big part around here of this place. So
that would be a cool episode in itself to me, because I've seen a lot of that cool memorabilia behind you, and I was like, I've often wanted to ask about it, and I wanted to know if it was real and stuff like that. So like,
it's real.
You got so much stuff. Like, that could be an episode.
There's only one fake sword up there. It's a replica, and that's Aragorn's sword. It's that first upright one right there. Next, there's the Scottish. It's this one right there. And it's fake and cheap. I got it from China for $13, like 12 years ago. And it came in. I went, wow, that's pretty. And I picked it up, and it fell apart. So it's glued. The handle's glued together. The handle's plastic over. It's a real blade, but it's like, come on. You couldn't have done a little better than that. I'd have paid double.
Right.
So, but that the Bigfoot's a real casting back there, right there. That goes back behind the picture of my wife.
The big what?
The Bigfoot cast.
Yeah, bring down. Whoa, I didn't know. I didn't because it is kind of. I'm like,
There.
and a lot of people might be on their phone, so it would be interesting for you to like. I don't know.
Yeah.
No pressure, but you were talking about doing different stuff, like bringing it up to the camera and showing it off. I think that's cool.
Well,
That's
this
cool.
is actually a cast of a cast. This was
Okay.
given to me at one of the Ghost Hunters events by why is his name slipping my mind? And I know him so well, but he had this was a casting of a casting of one of the original Patterson Gimli footprints from the
Whoa.
original film. And so it's a cast of a cast, and there's more detail that you can see when you see it up close. My wife, as she bought me a tattoo kit a year ago, and I've been working on tattooing. And the first time I pulled it out, she's standing here, she's helping me go through inks and stuff, and she spilled ink right across this. And I went, oops. And I don't hold any of that against her. I just think it's funny. But that's the discoloration on that. One of these days, I'll just paint it up, paint it white again. But that's that's the Bigfoot casting. And,
What do you think? What do you think about all this, Isaac? I told you he's a cool guy, right? He knows a lot about a lot of stuff, right?
There's my wife, by the way. That's her picture that blocks it. There's Rainey. So she is in bed already. So, but
lucky man, you're a lucky man.
My wife hides my Bigfoot. But ching. Ryan Gale. Ahoy, matey. I see you made it into the chat room. An hour and 39 minutes late for the show. So good to have you, Ryan.
I'm sorry, Isaac, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say it was nice to meet everyone. I was just gonna probably head out though.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
It's good to have you. I'm glad
my ADD's kicking in. I need to get a little gaming in, I think.
Dude, I know what that's like. I'm not a gamer, but I have I have the same squirrel. I got the same thing. And it's times I'm that way with projects. I'll start a book or a comic book, writing and illustrating them, and or a tarot deck or a whatever it might be, a private project. Then I'm like, I'm not even halfway through it. I'm like, ooh, I want to do a story about pirates. Now start a story about pirates. So I got all these unfinished things, and my wife, that's why she has to keep writing me in the business way about my tattooing. Get on that. You could make money doing tattoos. I'm just telling you. And so she keeps on me about that.
Isaac. Yeah, I just thought y'all two should meet or whatever.
Hey, I appreciate that, Sterling, and it's good to meet you, Isaac.
Yeah, I'll be around. I like these kind of conversations. Just kind of tired right now.
Yeah, no worries.
Ryan, don't feel guilty. I wasn't really guilting you. He says he'll watch the show tomorrow.
But yeah,
never go wrong with pirates, he says.
I'll see you around, Isaac.
See you, Isaac.
Yeah, heck of a nice guy. Heck of a nice guy.
And here's Sarah. We got Sarah out here. Sarah, I don't know how long you've been sitting there. There she is. How you
Scotty.
doing?
Hey guys.
Hey, what's up?
How you doing tonight?
I gotta adjust my volume.
Are we too loud?
Too low. So to bring it back to full circle, back to topic.
Yes.
About,
oh yeah, that's way over there now.
Yeah.
Nice topic.
I mean, we talked about, the whole idea of idealism and hero worship when it comes to, biblical figures, and the way we kind of cherry pick the good to overshadow the bad, but sort of gloss over the humanness of being in human nature, as people who can. I mean, David was a figure that did great things, when he was with God in the name of God, whether he won battles or he exorcised the demons from King Saul, or became the leader of Israel, despite all his faults and everything. And much like other figures in the Bible, it's supposed to be not only telling of the history, the justification of why we have authority or why we do what we do, but it's also it's like I was saying earlier, it's illustrative.
Yes.
So you said, yes, David was a person who was with God, and then through his choices and his reasons, he managed to took a sharp left turn. But
you know what, Sarah? Hold your thought with me for a second.
Okay.
I got to pull an old man moment. I got to pee so bad, I can taste it. So to quote Doug and Bob McKenzie.
Okay.
So I will be back. You two can talk for a second. I'm just going to leave the channel open. I just got to run up, and I'll be back. I don't usually admit that freely on the air, but I got to go. You're right.
That's back. How you know it's a live radio.
Scintillating.
Right.
Yeah, but please continue. If you have more to add on that.
Well, yeah, what I was saying is, which I'll try and hold off if Scotty wants to be here or not, which But what I was saying is that I don't want to say stories or accounts, within the Bible. They don't show us the why on why we live, but how to live. So you have King David and figures like Solomon and Adam, and you can pick any number of major figures within the Bible, and they either find them, like I said earlier, you take a sharp left or right turn and end up out of divine favor or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
But there's always like we were talking what Scotty was talking about with David and the Psalms of David, and there's always a way or an explanation of how to get back. So I mean, David, try to do it with, try to explain that way, I guess, in the best way through the Psalms, through his songs, which, the songs, I mean, his music in itself has its own form of divine power and all that stuff. I mean, it's like, in the earlier accounts when he was, exercising King Saul with the use of his harp. Or whatever they call it, the lyre or whatever instrument it was. So anybody who's been in a club knows what it's like to be a slave to a pulsating rhythm, But it's the whole. It takes kind of a, and I hate to use the word holistic approach, but I'm whole as in WHOLE. The whole approach to how we interact and behave with God, because like we always say, it's mind, body, and spirit. So we tend to look and say, oh, this person did this thing because A, B, and C, but we have to kind of look at it with a broadened perspective of not just even the whole thing with Bathsheba, is that yes, he was driven by his emotional lust or whatever it was, but I mean, there are always consequences, and look what happened to their child and all the rest of his children who ended up fighting within themselves and all that stuff. There was peace and unrest.
Yeah, I know that there is some theorizing in Baden's book where he talked about, it's interesting that all of David's sons, I think he had 2 sons who rebelled against him and wanted to take over, wanted the people to follow them. Put me in as king. Take my dad down. And they both ended up dead as a result, but not because David sentenced them to death, according to the scripture, but David was always conveniently absent, and somebody else did the deed of killing them. One was David's general. Another one was it the other general of David? Something like, I don't know what it was. But Absalom was killed by his general. Was it Abner? Was his general? And so it's interesting.
Yeah.
He goes through all these deaths of people in David's life, and we're going to go through a lot of this in this series, but he goes through them all, and David is always, in every one of them, they're a threat to David's throne, a threat to his monarchy, and kings in that day and age would root those people out and do away with them in cruel, unusual ways, usually.
And that's the cyclical nature of history too, even outside the Bible. You see that story imprinted everywhere in any sort of kingdom.
And of course,
the younger trying to usurp the old way.
Hold on, I gotta send Travis Thorpe a Travis, if you're listening out here it is, the link to the show. He says, Travis Thorpe says, throw me an invite, P-Man. I'll pop in for a little bit. So, sorry for that interruption there. But, so we might have Travis coming in. But there's so many things that happened in David's life where he was just kind of written out. He that he had anything to do with anything negative. And he was gone on a trip, or he went fishing, and his son ends up dead. Oh, why did you kill my son? Well, he was leading a rebellion against you, my lord. And, well, only in Jewish, Hebrew, you would have said that. And, there's so many things like that. Oh, here we go. Combat Rev. Boom. Travis. How you doing, brother?
Doing all right. How are you guys doing?
Most excellent. Thank you.
Continue on with your illustrious story of the great.
Oh, yes. And so, well, I was just going to say, there's all these kinds of things about David that are, you find that they're written like apologetic, the apologetic of the day and age. When I say context, that's why I brought this up at the beginning of the show. What's the context? Not just what we think of typically as the context of a story, but what's the context of the writer? Who would the writer have been writing to in his day and age? Was the writer going, I'm going to write down this story of David for the ages? No, they were writing it for their own history. Who's he writing to? The Jewish people. Who were the people who would have recognized this story? The people who were probably alive all through David's life. They're saying this account was probably written not long after the life of David. Because of the details, they had to show enough of the negatives so people don't go, wait a minute, we remember that differently because he did that. And so they had to keep all the details in, but they apologetically whitewashed it. And there was one thing in particular that I was thinking. Well, I started the series, the whole thing on Friday with the story of, you remember, if you know the story, David's out in the wilderness. He's an outcast. He's an outlaw. Saul the king is seeking his life. And after all this great glory of winning and this tells you the age of David, he wasn't a kid. It said when he beat the Goliath the giant, that the king made him captain of his bodyguard. So he's a young man at this point, probably late teens, early 20s. And but what does David do? He starts rising in power. The people like him. He's winning all these battles for Saul. And it talks about how there was something going on between David and the king's wife. Oh, we're just friends, but what happens when Saul drives him out and he's going to kill him? How many times did Saul try to kill David? 3 or 4 times. Finally, we got the scene where the Prince Jonathan says, I'll give you a sign. If I shoot an arrow out past you, way out there, it means run. Dad's going to kill you. And if I do this, it means you're okay. Well, he shoots the arrow way past David, and David runs with the clothes on his back. And yet it says in a little later passage that he took, I can't think of her name, Abinoam or something like that, the wife of Saul, came and joined David in the cave where he was living with he gathered 400 men. And I likened him on Friday till he was like a Robin Hood. He was outcast from the king. He was outlaw, living in the greenwood of Judea, which it was green and hilly back then. And he had a 400 men that were the dispossessed, the outlaws, those who owed on their taxes. They all gathered themselves to David and became his mighty men of valor, or his, I am not a merry man, his merry men. And but there's that story of Nabal and Abigail, where David sends a couple of guys to this rich dude's home. And the guys, you want to put on the affectatious accent. Our boss, David, we've been kind of watching your sheep over the last several months and making sure, there's no outlaws that come. You haven't lost any sheep. We kill the wolves, all of that. And we just like to, we didn't have any contract, but we think it would make our boss very, very happy should you reward us with some food and money. And Nabal, the rich dude, which, by the way, you can tell it's apologetic. What does the name Nabal mean in Hebrew? Nabal means fool. And Nabal says, I don't know who this David is. I didn't hire him to do nothing. Get out of my sight. Sends the guys packing. Well, David's so pissed off by this, he gathers up his 400 men, and they go riding on the estate of Nabal. And it's the wife, Abigail, who happens to be this gloriously beautiful, striking, hot woman, and the wife of the fool, Nabal. And she gathers up a bunch of donkeys, packs them up with food, and sends them and meets David on the road, on the way to Nabal's house to kill Nabal. And she says, my husband's a fool. His name even says it. Here's the stuff. Take it. And may the Lord bless you, and may you become king someday, and may all the people who oppose you be like my fool of a husband, Nabal. And so she's not only giving him the food, she's praising him. She's prophesying that he will be the next king. All these things in this little story. And David's like, well, thank you, Abigail, and thanks for turning me back from the evil I would have done today against your fool of a husband, Nabal. And so he takes all the goods and he rides away. And it says when Nabal finds out, he's so fucking pissed off, he has a stroke and he dies. You can see him just screaming and yelling. He's like, ah! Over dead. Well, what happens? David finds out Nabal's dead. So what does he do? He scoops up Abigail, marries her, and legally then owns all her husband's lands now. And has all his money and all his goods and his wife. She becomes one of his wives. So what's the moral of this story? He's painted out as being the good man. David's still the good guy in that story, when he was the racketeer. And so I've read this work by Baden. He says, how do we know David didn't off Nabal? But the story they gave it was the twist, the apologetic. And so it's interesting. This is the stuff about David that I think is very interesting.
Well, I see that a little bit differently, and a little bit less than racketeering, but they have specific rules when it comes to when people come to your house and hospitality. Enabled
hospitality, though.
Yeah, somebody comes over to your house.
Hi, me and my 400 friends. We're just coming to call. Can you feed us? I get that, sir. I'm not making fun of you, but the idea, I think that they were looking at hospitality laws. It was kind of like they're saying, we're doing this service for you. And the guy says, I didn't ask you to do this service for me. Why should I have to pay you for something I didn't ask you to do? So that's the, I don't know. What do you think, Sarah?
Well, I have to look at the account in detail, but I mean,
Sure.
just from a superficial thing, because even growing up in my own household, we had always had things
Sure.
about being hospitable. I mean, if somebody comes to your house, you always make sure they never leave without having something to eat or a drink or that sort
We
of
do
stuff.
that.
That was very, very considered very, very
Travis, did we feed you the last
important.
time you were here?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
You fed my heart.
There it is.
Right. And even with the whole thing with Abigail, I mean, I'm sure, considering how, what she thought of her husband, it was not a love marriage. This was a marriage of acquiring property or power, and that could also, I mean, who knows? Nobody knows what was actually in the heart of Abigail and David, but I mean, the fact that he took her in as his wife, it gave her some form of protection.
And of course, you can look at it that maybe it's the cynic in me that goes, yeah, he took her in for protection. All right. She was probably a good shag because she was good looking. It says the story. And what's the benefits of taking in Nabal's wife? Gets all of Nabal's property. There it is right there. He gets all the property and all the money.
I mean, even most figures in the Bible that are considered, the protagonists tend to be seen as, good looking. I mean, even Jesus on the cross, he still had abs. So, I mean,
he had abs. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, well, what is the Bible even says something about David? It says he was very handsome and had beautiful eyes, is what the Bible says about him.
I imagine that if I
an ancient way of
my
saying
own book, it would say the same thing about me. I mean, it wouldn't say anything about this dad bod. It would say that, I was just ripped, stacked, gorgeous. People threw themselves at me. Yeah,
Yeah. Is that an apologetic, folks, or is that the mythological legend about Travis that we are to believe now?
Right.
So.
And I guess that's somewhat true of history in general, right? What's the saying about the victors write the history, or what
right?
Right. So I mean, I think we've seen that throughout time.
Yeah.
But so would he have been would those eyes have been quite so good looking if he was on the other side of it? If he was, no one said Nabal had beautiful curly hair, right?
Yeah, maybe he did. Maybe Nabal was a good-looking dude.
I see. I don't know the Bible.
You get this picture by the story they tell of a middle-aged fat guy that married this gorgeous young wife because he had money to do it, and probably had the Italian horn on a chain, with his open-chested tunic, and had his gold chains. Who knows?
He could afford soap.
Yeah, but you were saying like he was described as a fool. He was he's a dumbass and things like that. Well,
so that's what the word Nabal means,
right?
Is fool. So what are we to take out of that story? Was it a fictional story?
Well, I blame his parents, because like why would you name your kid fool? You know what I mean? Like
I'm sure his name was actually like Timothy. And then when they were writing it, they're like,
my name is
Fool
Tim.
How convenient. How convenient that his name was that. You know what I mean? Like
Right. And wow, the whole thing, by the way, and we'll get into this deeper in one of these upcoming episodes, David was stooping the king's wife when he was in the palace. That's what I believe actually happened. Because, and I remember before I even knew that to be fact, before I read the book, there was this mini series they had started on David. And I don't remember the actor. He was kind of an unknown as far as bigger names in films and things, playing David. But there were guys that were, the guy they had playing Saul was that, I can't think of his name. You've seen him in many things. He's this big brute of a man. And you always see him. He played one of the Knights of the Round Table to Clive Owen's Arthur Englishman, kind of an East Ender, and he kind of talks like this, and
Is,
he's big
Danny
and
DeVito.
tough and built like a fire plug,
Yeah, it was Danny DeVito, right?
No, kind of a big, good-looking version of Danny DeVito, but he's the guy that played Saul. But in that, they were showing that David was having an affair with the king's wife, and I went, "Oh, where'd they get that?" Then I read Baden's book, and he sets forth some of the facts on this, the way it's worded, and things. What do you suppose was the prescribed law with an ancient Middle Eastern monarch? If you were the captain of the king's bodyguard and you were caught in bed with his wife, what do you think would be the consequence of that? Death. I don't mean to be harsh, but death. I think. And so, what did Saul keep trying to do? The way the storyteller writes it is that Saul was jealous of the Spirit of God that was in David. And maybe there was some truth to that. But he kept trying to pin David to the wall with his spear. And then what happens? He chases him away. Then what does David do when he leaves? Even in the story, he sends for Saul's wife, and she comes and joins him in the greenwood. Do you think maybe there's a little bit more going on under the covers than what the story tells? So that David wasn't being pursued because Saul was just an evil dude that wanted to off a possible opponent for the throne, but that David had violated one of the, and there are some things to point out in this when we get to the story, but he had violated something that was code, with monarchs of the day. You sleep with my wife, you're going to lose more body parts than you can count. And we'll distribute them throughout the kingdom. So is there truth to that? We'll get into that in some detail in one of these upcoming episodes.
I'm sure she forced herself on him, and he was.
I'm sure.
Yeah, and she was so powerful that he couldn't say no.
That's right.
He was caught up.
Caught up.
He didn't want to.
And he was like, "My God will not allow me to do this." But remember, David had already been, prior to the Goliath story, which launched his career. The prophet had already come and anointed him the next king. And he's like, "Why me? Why me? I'm but a humble, lovable shepherd boy." And the whole story about the anointing him king. Then he goes to bring his brother's lunch, basically, on the battle lines, and who's this dog out there? This big guy out in the field yelling up at our armies, defying the Lord God of Israel. And his brothers were kind of pushing him off. You just came to see the battle and all that. He says, "I'll go take him." He says, "How come nobody else here has done this?" So the whole of the army of Israel for 40 days has had this 9-foot-tall guy taunting them. "Whoever beats me wins the day. And if I beat you, we win the day." And nobody would take him on. And it says, by the way, interesting, if you've ever been to the Valley of Elah or seen pictures of it in Israel, where this is supposed to have taken place. And by the way, they've uncovered archaeologically the Philistine camp that the general built there. It's there. This is where it happened. And down in the flat of this little tiny valley, the armies of the Philistines were on this side of the slopes, and Israel was on that side of the slope. And at the beginning, it says Goliath came down and was taunting up to the Israelite soldiers. And by the end of the 40 days, it says, and as Goliath came up the hill to taunt the armies of Israel, so he started way back here. Now he's all the way over here after 40 days. And so what does David say? I don't think it's out of the question. He could have said something like this, but he says, you're coming at me with a spear and a sword and a this and a that. And he says, I come to you in the name of God. Take this. Zhoo, 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 zhoo. Thump. Stone in the forehead. There's the story. And what Saul had promised, whoever can take this guy out, his family will be tax-free in Israel. He will be the captain of my bodyguard, and I will give him the hand of my daughter in marriage, the princess. Now, it's interesting. When David kills Goliath, what does the story tell us? Saul fulfilled the promise, tax-free, made him the captain of the bodyguard, but he held back on giving him his daughter's hand. Why? Because he knew that David had been anointed the next king by the prophet. He did not want to strengthen his claims. So there's more to this story than meets the eye. And if David was stooping the king's wife, the king was going to off him for that reason alone. And
it also conveniently sets himself up to run away with Saul's wife. Because
That's
you couldn't be married to the daughter and the mom, could you? I mean, that would be kind of weird.
Yeah, that would be weird, wouldn't it? I'm not sure if she was the mother of Micah. Micah was his daughter. I'm not sure if she was Micah's mother or not.
Fair enough.
I don't know. I'd have to really go back through the details and find out. Sarah, what think you, Sarah?
Well, I mean, with the whole with the whole anointing, it sort of sets it up to set up David with his divine swagger.
Yeah,
he looks up at 9 foot, however tall Goliath was, and said, "I could take him.
I
thought of my side.
God's going to preserve me."
As far as it's supposed to be, I guess. Well, for me, it's like illustrative of no matter what the situation is, God has your back and makes the way.
Yeah, that's the application.
If you believe in Him and all that stuff, the power of belief and the anointing and all that stuff. So
it's a great story. The whole story of David is a great story. I love the story of David. So I love the part when in the biblical story, he runs off. And when Jonathan shoots the arrow, and so he takes off. My life, I got nothing. I don't even have any food with me. I got the clothes on my back. He doesn't have a sword. It says he goes to the town of Nob, N-O-B. And this is where the tabernacle of the covenant, the tent version of the temple, was kept, and the Ark of the Covenant. And the priests all lived there. And so David came in, and it says, Ahimelech, the high priest, saw David coming afar off. I don't know how he recognized him. Is it like, do you wear the same thing every day? I don't know. But he sees him, it says, sees him coming. And he runs up to David with his hands in the air and drops to his knees. What's the first thing the high priest of Israel says to David? What do you have to do with me, David, son of Jesse? His hands up. Why are you here? What do you have to do with me? His knees smote one against the other, it said. And David says, rise up. He says, and he's the captain of the king's bodyguard. He's a violent man. He's known to be violent. He's a warrior. I think that was the one thing about David's life. He wanted to build the temple, the story says. And God finally at one point told him, no. I'm going to leave that for your offspring. You are not a man of peace. You are a man of war. You are a warrior. You have consolidated. I'm going to leave it to your son in a peaceful reign to build the temple. This is what David was told. So David comes, and what does he want? He wants the sword of Goliath and some bread off the holy bread from the tabernacle because he's starving. And And obviously not going to sit down for a meal. He just wants the bread, and I'm taking off again. But he wants this Philistine sword to take with him. I don't know if he wielded it, it was too big, or if it was a symbol of his power. I don't know what it was, but the high priest gives him the sword. And I thought it was interesting. This is about 13 years after, by chronological story of the Bible tale, 13 years after the David-Goliath incident is when he's come to get the sword. Now, and he wanted the head of Goliath too. I think that the head of Goliath was probably something that was dried, put on a staff. There's your flags. You get the head of the giant on the top of this pole. And went out with his armies, more than likely. And so that's my supposition with that. But I thought it was very interesting that he still has the head and the sword of Goliath are in storage. It said, and after he slew Goliath, it says he took his head and his sword to Jerusalem with him. Now, what's interesting is that even this incident here, where he's running, Saul's not reigning from Jerusalem. They don't have Jerusalem yet. David has not conquered Jerusalem or the city of Salem at the time by the Jebusites. So it says he took the sword and the head of Goliath to Jerusalem with him. Jerusalem didn't exist as the city of David for another 13, 14 years after the event. And so he went out and conquered that city, and he still had the head. I think he had the head, and it was on a pole. This is my guess, knowing the kings of the day. And it's like, what is that thing that army has as its head? That's the head of Goliath. That's a giant's head. That is David. And that's what I kind of think. So we'll get into that more later, too. I love the story, and I love talking about it. It excites me to talk about this story and even the aspects of it probably being a little different than what we think it is in real life, that it's apologetic, because it's interesting to me when you start piecing this stuff together. And I know in his book, the guy who wrote his book on this, Joel Baden, he said at the end, toward the end of the book, in conclusion, kind of, he says, I don't think David of the Bible, David the king, would be somebody that any of us would really take a liking to personally. He says, I don't think he was a likable person. He was a warrior. He was a killer, probably a murderer, adulterer, all these things put together, building his kingdom. And Travis is like, hey,
yeah, I'm trying.
I found somebody who liked me.
I'm trying hard not to like the guy. I'm trying hard. Like,
yeah,
I'm sitting there like, okay, yep, check, yep,
yeah,
check,
check,
yep,
check.
okay, check, yep.
He's a badass. He's
like,
a badass.
Yeah, that's my kin, bro. Like,
there you go. And what all he was saying is he was probably not your nice, fun, lovable, fuzzy type of guy. He was
he sounds like
warrior.
a cuddly teddy bear.
Yeah, he was a pretty dark person, I think, and is what he concluded in his book. So
he sounds boring.
What's that?
He sounds boring.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting as we go through all this stuff.
I'm interested to hear more because I grew up very in a religious family, and so the stories are coming back to me, like what you were saying and what Sarah was saying, and some of the details. Because like now I remember like the giant, the sword from the giant. Yep. He actually it was made of Valerian steel, and he melted it down into two swords, so that
I hadn't heard that. I think you're thinking Lord of the Rings.
Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. That's Game of Thrones. Sorry. But no.
I hurt you.
It is coming,
yes.
Coming back to me. But you know, at the end of the day, and that's when I heard you talking about this subject. That was the first thing that came to my mind was David real? And I don't mean any disrespect to anybody by that, but like
Yeah.
Is he real? And you touched on that too. So yeah, I'm interested.
I think he was a real guy. I don't think there's any reason to doubt that he was not the king of Israel, not the great unifier of Judea. I think that was his mark. But like all great men like that, it's like I used the illustration at the beginning tonight. George Washington. Did he chop down a cherry tree? Probably not. But he was a real guy. So lots of legends and traditions about George Washington. Did he throw a silver dollar across the Potomac? Probably not. But he's still a real guy.
Well, I grew up glorifying, General Washington and putting him on a pedestal. And it wasn't until I don't know, probably 8 years ago, I finally find out about the Whiskey Rebellion. And then I'm like,
yeah,
what the hell? Here's this guy that I put on this pedestal is like this ultimate role model of who you should be looking at. And it's like, wait, hold on a second. You rebelled against your king. You rebelled against your grand master. You rebelled against all of these things because of a 3% tax. And then you start your country and your Congress goes, shoot. I don't know how your language is on your show. So
it's okay.
Okay. They're like, shit. We don't have enough money in our coffers. What are we going to do? And they're like, let's do a whiskey tax. And there's a bunch of Virginians that are like, no, we just fought a war over this.
Yeah, we just fought a war over the tea thing.
And here's General Washington marching the armies into the hills of Virginia, slaughtering his own people that just helped him fight a war over the same thing.
Exactly.
And I'm like, okay, I guess, yeah, it's hard to have heroes.
Dude, yeah.
Well
Real
said.
life. That's like, I thought the same thing about Captain Kirk until I found out he was a fictional character. Well, sorry, Travis.
Hey,
there it is.
Thanks for having me, Gal. Hey, see you, Sarah.
Hey, good to see you, Sterling.
Nice talking to you. I'm sorry, I'm Combat Rev.
Sarah. Travis.
Sarah, I've spoken with before, and I'm sorry, Travis. Yeah, I don't know if we have. So it's been a pleasure.
You take care.
Have a great night.
See you,
It's
sir.
good timing because I got to end the show. We're about 20 minutes over what we normally do. And everybody here's sleeping. And I noticed when I went upstairs, because we don't have a bathroom in the downstairs yet. So I had to go upstairs. While you two were talking, I could hear you clear as a bell up there. So I thought, oh, the whole house. So I had to turn it all down when I came back down here. So, but yeah. Thanks for coming on, Travis.
You're welcome. Yeah, I just got home from Lodge and I saw a notification you're live, and I figured, hey, I'll go.
And I love your new soundproofing there in the basement. That's nice.
It's not very soundproof. Yeah, I just started podcasting again on Thursday nights for the.
Hence the wah wah wah.
Yeah, the wah wah wah. Yeah, so yeah, we've been doing a news podcast and
right on,
been doing well. But yeah, I actually just came down to my office to go make sure everything was buttoned up before going to bed. And the resident ghost in the house turned my ring light on, and I was like, "Oh,
nice.
I guess you want me to go say hi to Scotty?" So
there it is.
Decided to come in. So
there it is. I'm glad you did. You should do it more often.
Oh yes.
Captain's Cabin, 10 o'clock every night. Well, Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's good to see you, Scotty.
All right, brother.
Take care.
Good to see you. Talk to you later.
Nice meeting you.
Likewise.
All right. And Sarah, good to have you too. I hope we didn't talk over you there like we always do. You know, part of it is, and this isn't a slam of anything, I don't see your face. And so I almost forget sometimes when we're talking that you're there unless you speak up. I got to hear you. It's just a subconscious thing. So forgive me if we talked over you too much.
That's all right. You know, I'm a pretty good sport about it.
You are. And it's good to have you here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the main lesson, I think, with the takeaway, at least for tonight, is going to be is people are complicated. I mean,
they are.
You can't treat them like, complete heroes or, almost have hero worship to the point of almost making them into like demigods. People are complicated. They're complex. They're going to stumble. They're going to rise.
Yep. And I think that's the one caveat is not the word. That's the one aspect of all of this that we have to keep in mind too, is that as we uncover what might be an apologetic about this real guy is that he was a real guy. And he had his faults and he had his good points. So very good points.
Yeah, it just goes to show that it's helping in that definition and what it means to be human.
Yes, there it is.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right.
Good to have you here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good night.
See you later.
Everybody else, thank you for being here. We're going to call it quits for tonight, and I appreciate you being part of the show. We'll be back Wednesday night with the next installment of this little series. I'm excited about it. I love talking about this. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed delivering it. Tomorrow may or may not have a Robertson with Wendy Robertson, depending on how she's doing. She's been pretty not up to par lately. So we'll see how she's doing. I'll let you know. Watch for the announcement. If you don't see one, it means we're not doing it. If we do it, it'll be at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. accordingly out west. So all of you, thanks for being here. Thanks for putting up with this show. Thanks for putting up with me. Thanks for continuing to come back for the same old. Actually, I hope it's better than that. So live long and prosper.